Wisden rates it the 9th best Test century ever made. Former Australian captain Ian Chappell says it's one of the bravest innings he's ever seen. Kim Hughes scored 9 tons for Australia in 70 tests, including a top score of 213 against India at Adelaide Oval. But there was none better than his defiant Boxing Day century of 1981.
Well, that's cracked. He really hit that one. That's 4 runs.
Australia was playing the all-conquering West Indies, undefeated in 15 tests, on a wicket as dodgy as a side street catfish curry. It wasn't only Hughes Day though. Fellow West Aussie great Dennis Lillee's end-of-day spell is celebrated as one of the most lethal ever unleashed. Remembered largely for the last ball of the day, with the MCG crowd chanting his name in reverence, pleading for a wicket, and he responded by skittling Viv Richards' stumps.
He's bowled him! He's bowled him! The last ball of the day, Lillee getting one to nip back, finding the inside edge and bowling out Viv Richards.
But it was Hughes who took the test away from the Windies earlier in the day, just as Australian cricket fans were feasting on leftover turkey and ham from Christmas Day. It was an imperious counter-attack of back foot square cuts, flicks off his hits, cover drives, straight drives, all in the face of fear.
It's been a triumph of good old-fashioned guts and determination.
With the Boxing Day Test next up in this compelling series against India, the West Sports Show is delighted to be joined by former Australian captain Kim Hughes to reflect on that memorable day, 15,696 days, or nearly 43 years ago. But first, let's set the scene for this remarkable innings. I'm going to go back to mid-December of 1981, 11 days before the Boxing Day Test. Australia had already wrapped up its 3-test series against Pakistan, but was skittled in the last of them by an innings at 82 runs on an MCG wicket so unpredictable in its bounce. Captain Glen Quartermain expressed genuine fears for the upcoming test against the West Indies, with some keeping subcontinental low and others rearing like a spitting python. Chappell feared for the safety of his team, about to face arguably the most fearsome quartet of all time, the lethal West Indies attack of Andy Roberts, Joel Garner, Colin Croft, and the man they called Whispering Death, Michael Holding. Welcome, Kim.
Mate, I can sit here and listen to all of that. That's one of the greatest introductions I've ever heard. But Glenn, it's great to be here. You know, I've often said to people that the West Indies were the greatest test side that's ever played the game, because no one's ever had 4 great fast bowlers. And as you said, Whispering Death, Michael Holding, Colin Croft, 6'6", Big Joel, 6'7" or 6'8". Andy Roberts was as close to Dennis Lillee as I've ever seen. And then to think when he retired, along came a scrubber called Malcolm Marshall. That was pretty handy.
He was the understudy on that tour, wasn't he?
He was, and he was the understudy for a couple of years. Well, I've always rated that Malcolm Marshall was the best all-round quick bowler that I ever faced. And when you think they had 4 great fast bowlers, they had a fantastic wicketkeeper in Dujon, they had an unbelievable captain in Clive, and then they had 2 openers in Greenwich and Haynes were very much like Langer and Hayden. Larry Gomes is often undersung because he wasn't the traditional West Indian that had all the flair and flamboyance. But I'm pretty sure I'm right, he scored more hundreds against Australia than the great Viv Richards. And then you had the main man in Viv. So they were a brilliant fielding side. I don't think, look, there's some other great sides in any eras, but no one's ever had 4 great fast bowlers. So they never got tired. They could slow the over rate down. They're the best that's ever been.
Just before we get on to the Windies and that day, let's just talk about the build-up. Coming out of that Pakistan series, there were real concerns about the pitch, and Glen Quartermain, as I alluded to, he was really concerned about it. What was the dialogue around that in the lead-up to the Windies?
Well, I'm pretty sure, if my memory's right, Ian Johnson, a well-known figure in Australian cricket, was in charge of the MCG. So therefore in charge of, he wasn't the curator, but he was in charge of it. And we'd said for a while that the MCG was diabolical. I mean, it would not only keep low, but it would also bounce. And against quicker bowlers, you didn't mind if it was against the spinners, they're not going to hit you in the head. But in some of these other games, they were sort of almost taking the surface and going through and then grubbering along the ground. And Ian just was not prepared to listen at all. We might as well have been speaking to, well, anyway, he didn't listen. And Greg got very, very frustrated, as he should do, and particularly against the West Indies when it's the worst wicket to face them on. I mean, they were spun out occasionally on turning wickets, but it was about the only time in their history of their great quartet of bowlers where conditions that suited them and they were beaten. Because, as I said, Joel's 6'7" or 6'8", Colin Croft 6'6", Andy was maybe 6'1", thereabouts, and Michael was 6'4". So they were big, tall fellows that had tremendous bounce, and the variation was an absolute blinking nightmare.
I want to talk to you about Colin a bit later. It's something when you made your ton. But first, so having said all that, we won the toss in that test and batted.
Yeah.
Do you just always bat when you win the toss?
Well, I mean, West Australian, whenever I won the toss at the WACA, playing for Western Australia or Australia, I never ever batted first because we had a couple of scrubbers called Dennis Lillee and Terry Alderman opening the bowling downwind. And then we had fellas like Ian Brayshaw or Mick Malone, Kenny McClay, Bruce Yardley. Was just fantastic up into the wind, and the wicket never deteriorated. It was quick, but the bounce was very true. And that's where in Western Australia you learnt to play well off the back foot. So fellas like Graham Wood or Bruce Laird, and the West Indies rated Bruce Laird the toughest opener that they ever bowled to, Stumpy Laird. And Stumpy was only 5'9" or 10 on a good day. And I think that was good for me because you did learn to play well off the back foot. But the MCG, for a while, it just should have been dug up, and it never was.
Good segue, because just that on day one, Boxing Day 1981, Greg's fears were proven correct early on. So Australia in plenty of trouble. First 4 caught behind by the wicketkeeper Derek Murray. Bruce Laird's gone for 4. Graham Wood for 3. Greg Chappell a golden duck, and that was very early in his infamous run of low scores.
6 or 7 ducks.
Yeah, I'm not out of form. I just keep getting out. Was his famous.
And the thing about him, he never played a mismatch, Greg. He was always good enough to get a nick.
Yes.
And it was either Roberts or Holding or this. And I think he made 6 or 7 blobs in a row. And apart from Bradman, he's as good as anybody else that's ever played the game.
I always reckon that's what's unfair about cricket. The better you are, the more likely you are to get a nick.
Well, Greg very rarely ever played and missed.
So, Australia in trouble early. You make your way out to bat. Australia is 3 for 8. Yeah. Now, I'll ask you what your mindset was, but I'm also going to ask you about walking out onto the MCG on a Boxing Day test.
Yeah.
And I think your early memories of the MCG were footy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, growing up in rural Western Australia, mate, if you didn't play footy or cricket, you went to the library. And I wasn't too keen on the Blinken Library. The librarians were the happiest people I've ever seen in my life in those days. So, and I followed footy. I followed Subiaco all my life. My dad played for them in the war eras. And then as a young boy, I was coached by Angus Glendinning, who's the father of Ross Glendinning. So, of course, the Victorians, being thieves, they would steal our top players, Cable and Bazusto and Glendinning and all the others, that went over there, Mike Fitzpatrick. So my favourite show of the whole week was The Winners. With Drew Morfitt, 6 o'clock on a Sunday, my dad and my brother Glenn, and we'd watch it there, 2 or 3 games, the highlights. And then the finals were always at the MCG.
Mm.
And then you'd have Christmas Day, but no matter what, we always had a Boxing Day thing at Frank Parry, who was my coach, and you'd watch the cricket. No matter what's happened, you're playing cricket down on the beach or you're watching it on the telly, and it starts early. And so I just grew up. And more following the football, if you like, and be able to run out. And my very first game for Australia was 12th man at the MCG. And it was against Pakistan. And someone got injured. And I remember coming out on the ground. And it was one of those late in the afternoon. And Dennis all of a sudden took a wicket or 2. And he pushed off the side screen, and I came on, I was at mid-off, and they started to chant, kill, kill, kill. I wanted to run through a brick wall. I want to kill some prick, excuse the language, but that's what you did. You were just, the adrenaline was just, you would have run through a brick wall. and I was just the 12th man. I was that excited. I dived for a ball, injured my shoulder, had to get taken. I took myself off.
Is that right?
Yeah, as the 12th man. But I still remember Mushtaq Mohammed, the captain. He didn't wait around for the decision. He nicked it and just walked off. He was not going to face Dennis Lillee there for too much longer
I don't blame
because
him.
Dennis was screaming in. This is late in the day.
Yeah.
And, so, you grew up as a young boy. The MCG is the home of sport.
So you walk out that day,
Yeah.
3 for 8. What's going through your mind?
Frankie Parry was one of these very, very positive people. And I was always been a very positive person. But when you walk out like that, and you're 3 for 8, and Greg's passed you on the way out for
Any words of advice?
No.
Okay.
Just, mate, what can he say? Good luck.
Yeah.
But you go out, you take your guard, you scratch your box about 20 times. I don't know whether we'd like to let the girls know you've got 2 or whatever. You take that regal walk down the pitch. I've seen blokes do that on concrete. There's no divots in the wicket, but this day there was.
Yeah.
And you need a little bit of luck. But I think, Glenn, when I got to about 15 or 20, I'd worked out that to stay here any longer, fortune favours the brave. And I thought, I'm going to have to play a few shots because I tell you what, the balls are doing this and that and going all over the place. And there's nowhere to hide. You're not going to get Viv Richards to bowl a few, spinners, or you can't get the 4th change bowler because he's Joel Garner. Oh, good one. Or Andy Robb or Michael Holding or whatever it is. And then they're just steaming in. So, but you've got to have the Gahulis or the balls to make the decision. And having made that decision, it's incredible how then the luck goes your way, if you like. So I thought, and I could play well off the back foot because I came from Western Australia at the Wacker. So I thought, well, mate, if it's anywhere there, I'm just going to get after it, and if I happen to get, knocked over, well, but at least go down screaming. And I got a couple of inside edges that went for 4. They had attacking fields. You had 4 slips, bat pad. So there was no one in the covers, there was one in the cover type of thing. So if you could get bat on ball and through the field, off you went. But I can remember, it's funny, we had a couple of little partnerships.
Yes.
And I can remember when we were 9 down and out comes the ferret.
Yes.
He's not the rabbit, Terry Alderman, because a ferret goes in after the rabbits. And rabbits are 9, 10, 11, but Terry was a
So
real...
Terry's great a bowler as he was, could not bat.
Could not bat.
Yeah,
Could not bat to save himself.
Yeah.
But you do what is the right thing is to meet the incoming batsman. Nothing intelligent ever takes place, but that's what you do because you saw Ian Chappell do it or Bill Laurie do it or whomever it was before you on the telly. And as I've turned my back, I said, oh, good luck, because I thought Terry's going to last 1 ball. And I was on, I think, 60 or thereabouts, close to maybe 70. But it was incredible how, Terry got little inside edges and and it's a bit like a game of footy. You might be 5 goals behind with 5 minutes to go before 3/4 time and you kick a couple of goals and you think, geez, we've got a chance. And we turned 160 or 170 into nearly 200. And that's when I started to run down the wicket to Joel, hitting him over mid-wicket. And I can still remember now that when I got my 100, I came back and hit one, just smashed it through point area. And in those days, no one ran onto the MCG because, that wasn't done. And also, in those days, it wasn't as celebrity or, now if I was playing, I'd be running around the ground like 5 or 10 times, holding my bat up and say, you bloody beauty, good, have a look at me, being a very humble person. But you had to sort of step to the side and lip your lid to say thanks very much. But people started to run on the ground. And I moved away from the centre wicket.
You didn't want them to standing on an already stuffed up pitch.
Yeah. And I wanted to move away so they would come and then they wanted to, shake me and congratulate me and then off they went. I mean, now, if you were doing it, you'd be running, as I said, taking, well, give me some money.
So I just want to take you back just to Terry Alderman for a second there. So what happened? Alan Border goes for 4, Duke Willem goes for 17, so you're 5 for 59. You're working your way through. I think Rod Marsh and Bruce Yardley both made 21, so he was 7 for 149. You brought up your 50 with a 4. Richie Beno says that was a triumph of good old-fashioned guts and determination.
Yep.
Now, Richie's pretty understated, so that's pretty good praise. And I think when you made 100, he spoke volumes of you. Then you had Lillee and Jeff Lawson go cheaply, 9 for 155. You're approaching 70, as you said. In comes Terry Alderman. Now, I'll throw this quote at you from Terry Alderman. I remember Joel Garner bowling a bouncer to me. I thought it was a bouncer, and I ducked under it, and it hit me in the back of the head. So he had that white helmet on.
Oh, yeah.
And they appealed for LB because the ball just didn't get up.
Yeah.
And he walks up to you, and he says, I don't reckon I'm going to be around here for too long, so you'd better start playing your shots. Well, he'd already played a good ones, but he just unleashed from that point. So.
I didn't think I needed a licence from Terry to get after him. I just thought poor old Terry, was going to get
But that day, as Terry hung around and you got closer and closer to that 100, the MCG, and there were 38,755 people there, and it was started to build this maybe if Terry can hang on. And he did, of course. So what was going through your mind in that period?
All I can really remember is I wasn't thinking about the 100. I was just thinking, if I ran down the wicket, smashed Joel over mid-wicket, I thought that's another 4 for us, to see if we could get to 200. I didn't really know how many I was. I knew I was close to, but I wasn't about getting 100. I just thought every run we get is a bonus for our team. And as it was, we got to 200. I thought and I was, anyway, as soon as I got 100, I don't know whether Terry thought, well, that's enough for me.
Because he was out.
Kept going. And he got, but maybe there was someone up there that was looking down and saying, well, look, we're not going to leave you on 99. We're going to leave you on 100 not out, which I never really played for not outs. That wasn't my go, But it was a bit ironical. As soon as I got 100, then Terry got out. But the one thing I do remember is Crofty was one of those guys that, never said a word. And we
this
never...
is Colin Croft.
Yeah, Colin Croft. We never said a word to them. If you were thinking, I hope his wife is all right or his girlfriend's good, and that you didn't want to upset the West Indies quicks at all because they had the heavy artillery. And we were starting to walk off, and I see Crofty coming down towards me, and I thought, geez, he's not going to have another go at me because they never abuse you verbally. They look at you, but... and he came down and got pretty close, and all he said, and I've always remembered it, is well played, man, well played, in that beautiful, lovely accent. And I've always remembered it because to get respect from someone that had been trying to kill you for so long. And he was a man of, from Guyana, I'm pretty sure, Colin Croft, a man of very few words.
Just talk me through that quartet. And we obviously Malcolm Marshall came along afterwards, but Colin Croft, who was very lively. Joel Garner, what was it sort of a bowler was he?
Well, Joel was medium pace by comparison. Joel was their fourth bowler, and would bowl, push into the wind if there was a strong wind, say at the whacker, and would just bowl what I called medium pace. I mean, Whispering Death, Michael Holding. Was everything you'd love to be. I mean, he was a beautiful, from Jamaica, and when he glided in, you never heard a footstep.
So that's why it was called Whispering Death.
Yeah, because the umpire could never hear him running in. And one of the nicest blokes you'd ever meet. Just a beautiful, 6'4", a supreme athlete. Andy Roberts was very much in the ilk of Dennis Lillee. He had a craft, and I remember in another game, I got to about 30. Again, it was at the MCG against the West Indies, and I remember, and it might have even been this game. Anyway, he dropped one, and when you're in. Anyway, dropped one shot and I hooked it. Went for 4. And you do that regal walk down the wicket and pat down the divots. There's no divots, but you played a good shot and the crowd's looking at me. You think, you bloody beauty, how good was that? And I think I've got him now. Next ball, I think I got about halfway through and it whistled past my head and I was a millisecond too late. And he just looked at me, didn't say a word, but it was all about don't get too clever. And I almost said, sorry, Mr. Roberts, I'll just go back and get on the back foot. Don't get ahead of yourself. Crofty was 6'6", 6'7", but would be very different, totally different to Michael Holding, who was very rhythmical, and you could get in the rhythm with him. Crofty would run in and then get out very wide angle. You think Bumrah in today's cricket gets out wide, but Crofty would get out a lot wider, would just look at you. But Joel was medium pace, and it wasn't until Andy and Michael left that then Joel got the new ball, so therefore his role changed and he added another yard or so and became more of an attacking bowler rather than a bloke that held an end up. But the thing was that, even if you got on top of them, they'd put, two back. And how can you can't drive things that are going to hit you in the head.
Yes. On that subject, so I read that you thought that day when you went out to bat, if I can get them bowling at me, I'm a chance here. If they bowl to the wickets, I'm probably in a bit of trouble. So if I can get them bowling at me. And interesting, one of the things Ian Chappell brought up about that innings, as I said earlier, he said he got 100 out of 198, which is a pretty amazing percentage of the innings. Bravery was required in this innings. Thought you batted by numbers rather than the delivery. So what he meant by that was he's seen you block half volleys and then the next ball would be full length and you'd smash it. Is that fair?
Well, I never went by numbers. It might have looked for the bystander like that. Yes, I was impetuous, if you like. But in that particular innings, I just thought, mate, after a while, no matter how well I bat, there's going to be a ball that'll knock me over. So I may as well try and get him to bowl at me, bowl short, rather than top of off stump and me nick it, because I could play well off the back foot. And that was the thing. I could cut, I could pull, and if it then was up, have a crack at it. But to try and get them away from just bowling top of off stump. But as I said, fortune favours the brave. You've got to have the Gahulis to make the decision in the first place. And in that particular, it worked.
Did you feel any energy from the crowd?
Oh, yeah, mate. But it's one of those things where, as I said, in that era, you would dip your lid and say thanks very much, when really, if I had my timing, I'd be running around the thing. You'd want to bloody run up and down and give it this one. And you did get caught up in the crowd. Now, I'd like to say to people, there was 150,000 people there. And it is incredible. Mate, when I go to Victoria, I'm almost more recognised there. And there must have been 500,000 people.
Yes, everyone was there that day.
Because they were there. But they were there on the TV. Because there was only 37 or 38,000 people there that day.
Yes.
But they were there. And it's one of there's that great saying, one glorious hour of sheer delight is worth an age without a name. And lots of people go to their graves remembering that day at the MCG, as we will remember, Travis Head, the last couple of innings in the Test match. I mean, he's just been, and you can't teach that. Maybe an Adam Gilchrist that got an unbelievable 100 here, or a Viv Richards. But yeah, it was just one of those very, very special days.
Well, one of the growing up in Victoria, I was religiously at the Boxing Day Test every year.
Yeah.
One of the great regrets of my life is I wasn't there. We holidaying down at Phillip Island, so I didn't. Clearly listening to it on radio, but what was the feeling? So your innings, as Terry's out, you go back into the dressing room there at the MCG in the fading light. What was the feeling about what you can do here?
Well, mate, that is a great question, because we get up there, so we're all euphoric because we've turned 160 in at nearly 200. So we kicked a couple of goals just before three-quarter time, and they're all boys are pumped. We've got maybe an hour, 45 minutes to go, and from my memory, one of Greenwich or Haynes was injured, and a fellow called Fayoud Bacchus was the fellow that came in to replace them. And Fayoud Bacchus, hopefully he's not listening, but he was a cosmetic cricketer.
Okay.
Looked good, smelt good, not too much ticker.
Okay.
If you get So anyway, we all go out there, and Dennis knocks over Fayoud Bacchus or whatever, and at one stage a Crofty came in as a night watchman, I'm pretty sure, remember right. So we're all going up to Dennis, because Dennis was the main man. Get into this prick, get into him, and as we walk past Crofty, hope you do well, Mr. Croft, hope you're good, because we didn't want to rock their boat.
No, they're going to have another go at you.
But absolutely, how the kids, how's Mrs. Croft, how's whatever, Mrs. Holding, Mrs. Roberts or whatever. Don't get them upset. So anyway, Dennis knocks him over or whatever, and then out comes Smokin' Joe.
Yes.
Now, mate, I remember as a younger boy, Western Australia played the West Indies in like a shield game in 1975. And this was just when the West Indies were just starting to establish themselves
as the world dominant
as
force
the world
they
dominance.
were. Yeah.
Frederick's got an unbelievable 100, but we played him in the Test match of Michael Holding. But anyway, Viv against Western Australia, he got about 170, 180. Mate, 5'11", his skin was just glistening, and he had these white shells around his neck, you know. And I thought, God, I was down City Beach next day looking for those bloody shells.
You wanted some.
And he had that presence about him, Viv. So he's pumping his handle, you know, coming out smoking,
the chewing gum, the arse sticking out,
you know, and mate, it looks as if he'd
no
been
helmet.
No, mate, and it looks as if he'd been in the gym all of his life. But mate, he was the main man.
Yeah,
and I know as you know, professional athletes, you're thinking in the slips. You're thinking, well, look at me. If Greg Chappell said, who wants to field at third man, there would have been 7 of us, because you're thinking, nick it to Rod, he never drops it. Nick it to Greg Chappell, he never drops it. But for Christ's sake, don't nick it to me, because I don't want to drop the game. You know, that's what you're shitting yourself.
Yeah.
And in comes Dennis. You know, the last ball
of the day.
Just
paint the scene for us, the crowd.
The crowd, look, it felt as if there was 100,000 there, because the crowd was just kill.
I've never heard a chant like Lillee at the MCG when you're in there as a kid and the hairs are up on the back of your neck.
But, mate, they do. And even, you know, I just watched a little highlight the other day of the Scorchers winning the Big Bash last year, and they're all coming out of the thing, and I've got hairs in my neck. I want to run through a brick wall. It does something to you, and hopefully I'll never, ever lose that. And Dennis came in the last ball, and Viv saw it early. I mean, he could just see it earlier than anybody else. Got an inside edge onto the dollies. Last ball of the day. I mean, if you'd scripted it, you'd said, mate, please, for God's sake. You know, we've seen the Three Stooges, we've seen Alice in Wonderland, but, you know, this is a test match. Things don't like this happen.
Yeah.
And all I can still remember is Dennis jumping high, Rod Marsh wanting to kiss everybody, and that was an ugly look because Bacchus had his big moustache on, and we're all running off, and Dennis is charging.
Dennis has gone straight off, though. Hasn't stopped.
Running, and we're all trying to catch up with him, because I think that makes him about 3 or 4 down, and we've got the great man out.
They were 4 for 10.
4 for 10.
He got 3 for 1 off 11 balls.
Off 11. So we're running off the ground, and the crowd is just, you just want to be a part of it, you know, and I'm clapping older people and all that sort of thing. So we come up the race and then down the stairs, and, you know, we were just all that excited. So we're all having our beers, and we used to stay at the Travel Lodge, just up the road. You know, we were euphoric. So we all had a few beers, and we would. In those days, Dennis was never, ever a drinker. He might have, you know, a spirit, but that was at the end of it. But you'd always have your beers.
Yep.
The thing that I remember is that it's great to do well yourself, but we won that match.
Yes.
And a West Australian called Bruce Shardley got 5 for in the second innings. I'm pretty sure he got a 5 for. And it was about the only time, I guarantee, that the West Indies were ever beaten when the wicket suited them.
It was also 15 tests without defeat leading into that test. And I'll talk to you the next day at 2:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, December 27, Dennis induced an edged stroke from Gomes.
Oh, yeah, Larry.
To pass the world record of 309 wickets, which was held by Lance Gibbs, of course.
The great West Indian.
So it was this test just kept giving, didn't it? The next day, a moment of greatness.
Yeah. Oh, you know, and Larry Gomes batting at 3, people didn't really appreciate how good a player he was. He had one of those abilities to play and miss, then get an inside edge down to fine leg. Never would smash you through the covers, not like the Greenwich Haynes, Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd, any of those, Dujon, any of those blokes at all. But he wore down bowlers, you know, and he had a great temperament and was prepared to push his singles, the master of the nick and nudge.
I think Dennis bounced him in the first over that day, just to let him know it's game on. And I'm going to get the record today.
Yeah.
So was there what was the feeling when he did?
Well, you know, with Dennis, once he got a ball in his hand, you didn't have to get him excited about it. He was on for young and old, and there was no one more competitive.
I reckon he still is.
Oh, Dennis, at 75 or
he's still got the gleam in the eye.
Oh yeah, and you tend to think that Dennis Lillee may be 6'3" or that sort of thing, but Dennis was a Collingwood 6-footer. Was maybe just on 6 foot, but his dedication from coming back from his injury, he worked with Austin Robertson Senior in just getting his running.
Get that lower back injury. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can remember facing Dennis in the nets at the Wacker when I was only 15 or 16. Oh, that was a pleasant experience. We got a thigh pad about half an inch thing. You got the old green pimple gloves. You wear the pink plastic protector and no helmet. And the balls, and Dennis is screaming downwind, and I'm picking the ball up out of the net. It's embedded into the wire mesh, and I'm giving it back to him with a smile on my face, and he thinks I'm a little smart ass, and he said, well, watch out for the next one, you curly-headed prick. That was welcome to state training.
It won't surprise you to know that Michael Holding's match figures are 11 wickets for that match. Is a record for West Indies v Australia. Derek Murray took 9 catches in that match, which won't surprise you either because it's nick, isn't it?
Well, that was the thing, and that's why I wanted to get them to bowl short rather than keeping the ball up. And I think they just got away from their discipline because I was starting to charge at them or do things. And as I said, fortune favours the brave.
Just leave us with one thought. Who's the most exciting? Who's the cricketer you like watching the most now?
Well, right at the moment is Travis Head. He is really exciting. You know, I do like watching the technicians, those that have got a really good technique. That can play well off the back foot, and you don't see too many players that play well off the back foot. And if I had my way of coaching juniors, I'd coach them without a helmet. Now you can't because of safety, duty of care, because they just lunge on the front foot. But I am the manager of my grandson, who is 11, and I told him that I've got a lot of contacts, and most managers get 5, 10, 15%. Mm-hmm. How much will you pay me? And he said 1%. I said, now listen here. Granddad's a pensioner. So anyway, over a period of time, I got him up to 15%. He's only 11.
Okay.
And anyway,
you've done well.
Mate, I've got him up to 15%. So I've got some old Kim Hughes letterhead.
Well, he needs to get an IPL contract, Kim.
Yes, in the next year or two, if he can, at 11 years of age. So anyway, I wrote out on my old letterhead, I said, I, Kimberley John Hughes, former Australian cricket captain, hereby appoint myself as lifetime and sole manager of, and his name is Mitchell Kimberley Hughes, got him to sign. I signed Kimberley John Hughes underneath, and then we got his little 8 or 9, it was about 6 or 9 months ago, his little brother to sign, and he spelled Hughes, H-O-O-G-S, Hughes. So I've got that, and I've got some vision of him. I have a hit with my son and him up at Wanneroo Indoor Nets on a Tuesday morning. And he played a couple of shots the other day down on one knee. And you can't teach that.
No.
And he's got it. And he's just such a lovely boy. And I've come in front of it because my son, Bradley, was sort of videoing it and putting the balls in. And I've come in front and said, that's my grandson. That's why I'm his man. We had a laugh, but he's a beautiful boy as well.
Kim Hughes, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
A pleasure, anytime.